The Krebs cycle is our body's way of breaking down the food we eat to release energy so we can do everything we need to: move, think, and live. Now, what's the difference between the Krebs cycle and glycolysis we discussed previously? The Krebs cycle and glycolysis are both important parts of how our bodies turn food into energy, but they are different processes with distinct roles. Here's a breakdown of the key differences. 1. Location in the cell. Glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm, which is the fluid inside the cell, outside the nucleus and organelles. The Krebs cycle, on the other hand, happens in the mitochondria, often called the powerhouse of the cell. 2. Oxygen requirement. Glycolysis does not require oxygen. It is an anaerobic process, meaning it can happen whether or not oxygen is present. The Krebs cycle requires oxygen indirectly. It's part of an aerobic process because it depends on the presence of oxygen for the overall energy production process. Main function glycolysis breaks down glucose, which is a 6-carbon sugar, into pyruvate, a 3-carbon molecule. This process generates a small amount of energy. The Krebs cycle takes the pyruvate in the form of acetyl-CoA and further breaks it down to release even more energy. This produces the high-energy molecules NADH and FAD2 that will be used to make a lot of ATP, or energy, later. Energy-produced glycolysis produces 2 ATP molecules for every glucose molecule. The Krebs cycle produces 2 ATP molecules for every glucose molecule as well, since it turns once for each pyruvate. But it also produces a lot of NADH and FADH2, which are used later in the electron transport chain to produce much more ATP. End products: glycolysis produces 2 molecules of pyruvate, 2 ATP, and 2 NADH. The Krebs cycle produces carbon dioxide, NADH, FAD2, and a small amount of ATP. A purpose glycolysis is the first step in breaking down glucose, providing energy quickly and creating pyruvate for further energy extraction. The Krebs cycle is the second major step following glycolysis and is part of a more efficient energy extraction process that provides much more ATP in the long run. Summary: glycolysis is the initial breakdown of glucose into pyruvate and produces a small amount of energy without requiring oxygen. The Krebs cycle takes the pyruvate from glycolysis and processes it further in the presence of oxygen to produce a lot more energy, mainly through the production of NADH and FADH2, which fuel ATP production in the final steps.